The sun was setting on a cold winter's day in the small town of Redwood, casting long shadows upon the old, decrepit house at the end of the street. It was here that Carol, a middle-aged woman, lived with her son Tom. They were both trapped in a world of darkness and torment. Tom, a once bright and ambitious boy, had been battling schizophrenia since his teenage years. Carol, herself no stranger to emotional pain, had suffered severe depression after her husband's death. He had been a kind, caring man, and his passing left Carol feeling empty and alone. She found herself unable to cope with her son's growing need for help, and over time, she had gradually withdrawn from him, leaving Tom to fend for himself in the throes of his mental illness. Tom's schizophrenia was a constant source of terror for him. His days were filled with unpredictable episodes of hallucinations, paranoia, and disorganized thoughts. The voices in his head never ceased. They whispered terrible things to him and egged him on to do unspeakable acts. In the beginning, Tom would cry out for his mother, begging her to save him from the demons that haunted him. But his pleas fell on deaf ears, as Carol had become increasingly consumed by her own despair. She spent her days and nights locked away in her room, a prisoner of her own mind. The house, once filled with love and laughter, had transformed into a place where two tortured souls coexisted in silence. As the years went by, Tom's resentment towards his mother grew. He couldn't understand why she had abandoned him to suffer alone. The voices in his head grew louder and more insistent, feeding on his bitterness and anger. They began to plant dark thoughts in his mind, urging him to take revenge on his neglectful mother. One fateful night, as the wind howled outside and the moon cast eerie shadows across the room, Tom made up his mind. He would make his mother pay for the pain she had caused him. Creeping through the creaking halls, Tom approached his mother's room. The voices in his head reached a fever pitch, encouraging him to confront her. He hesitated for a moment, his hand on the doorknob, before finally swinging the door open. Carol lay in her bed, her eyes wide with terror as she stared at her son's haggard face. The light from the hallway cast a sinister glow on him, making him appear even more menacing. For a moment, she thought she saw a glimmer of the boy she had once known, but it was quickly swallowed by the darkness that now consumed him. "Tom, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Mother, you left me," Tom snarled, his voice barely recognizable. "You left me to suffer alone with these demons, and now it's your turn to feel the pain." Before she could react, Tom lunged at her, his hands wrapping around her throat. Carol struggled, clawing at her son's face and gasping for breath. But it was too late. The life drained from her eyes as Tom tightened his grip, and the last thing she saw was the twisted face of her own son. In the aftermath of his mother's death, Tom fled, disappearing into the night. The small town of Redwood was shocked by the gruesome discovery the following morning. Carol's lifeless body was found by a neighbor who had come to check on her after noticing her door ajar. The search for Tom went on for years, but he had seemingly vanished without a trace. People in the town would occasionally catch glimpses of a shadowy figure, and whispers of Tom's presence haunted the community. But the truth would not come to light until 6 years after that fateful night. In the depths of the forest that surrounded Redwood, a group of hikers stumbled upon a makeshift campsite. The man living there appeared wild and unkempt, a far cry from the person he had once been. It was Tom, and he had been surviving in the wilderness, hiding from the world and the consequences of his actions. The authorities were called, and Tom was taken into custody. As the news spread, the town was gripped by a mixture of relief and horror. The once promising boy had become a monstrous killer, a ghost that had haunted them all for years. During the trial, the full extent of Tom's suffering came to light. The doctors who examined him testified that his schizophrenia had been exacerbated by his mother's neglect, pushing him further into the clutches of his delusions. The voices in his head had grown stronger, and he had been unable to resist their sinister commands. The jury found Tom guilty of his mother's murder. As he was led away to begin his life sentence, the townspeople couldn't help but wonder if they too had played a part in his downfall. Perhaps if they had reached out to the troubled boy, offered him the support he so desperately needed, the tragedy could have been avoided. Tom's story serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of mental illness and the importance of compassion and understanding. The fractured minds of Carol and her son had led them both down a dark path, culminating in a night of terror that would haunt the town of Redwood forever. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more true scary stories.